name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 47 of The Grief of Politics. I'm joined by Avin Carroll. See, I made it right. Nobody will know how I screwed up in the beginning. I think the reason why I say
You just admitted it.
I know that's
Oh man,
that's a rookie
everyone
move.
will know, Joe.
Everybody,
Everyone will
the
know.
5 subscribers we have on YouTube.
Yeah.
I think why I say once again is because we do this once a month, and it does seem like just the past few years since we've been doing the podcast, a week's worth of news goes by in a day. It seems like. It just seems like it, especially with the election, and we've called each other, obviously privately, not recorded, part of content, because we are actual friends. Imagine that. It's like, man, this is crazy. And, having to wait, which I'm glad we do wait because, again, news is coming out so quickly. It's easy to respond, and I think we'll talk about this in the episode. But I heard the same, probably 7 or 8 things from all the kind of people on the left. I'm sure you heard some of that on the right. The people that weren't basking in the win of Donald Trump. He's our new old president. I said to you over the phone, which is true. In various ways, he was president before. He's 78 now. He's the oldest candidate or president elect, I should say. So,
yes, not the oldest president to have been in office, but the oldest president elect, meaning
he will.
Oldest as they're about to go into office.
Right. He will be old when he leaves, right? Or, he's going to be the oldest.
82.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. So looking over everything you and I talked privately on the phone, like I said, about, the response from everybody. What are the 7 things? Because I have bullet points, but what did you hear? Because you're probably talking to people a little bit more on the right, you being a libertarian and all. What are you hearing from people of why the Democratic Party lost the election?
The broad consensus of what I'm reading and seeing, people I've talked to, is, it was about the economy. The election wasn't about the social issues that everyone's up in arms about. It was really about the economy.
I heard that.
You and I talked the day after the election in the morning, and you brought up, right, someone who's struggling to put food on the table. $1 for a dozen eggs makes a lot of difference, and that's really all you're thinking about. You're not considering all the different various rights issues that are on the table.
Yeah.
You're just looking at, Trump said he's going to make the economy better. The economy was better when he was in office. The economy was worse when Biden was in office, and Kamala is essentially a Biden proxy. She's not distancing herself from him. So I'm going to go with the guy who helped me pay my bills.
Yeah, publicly she didn't distance herself. That famous The View quote. With James Carville, the Democratic operative that worked on the Bill Clinton campaign. I don't know his official title, but I've seen him. Old Southerner. I think he's from Louisiana. Deep Southern voice. He was the one that came up with the quote that is forever quoted in this election is, "It's the economy, stupid." Just when he told people on the Clinton campaign, he told everybody working in the field offices, hey, when you go door to door, focus on the economy. I mean, in 92, whatever you think about Bill Clinton's policies, the economy was kind of rip-roaring in 90, whatever he was. So that's and that's kind of what this is. And anecdotally, I heard from a few Trump supporters I know that say, yeah, the economy was good the first couple of years, barring COVID. So that's what I want. I want that. I don't want this record inflation. I don't want whatever. And I told you on the phone, I keep hearing the term, especially on the far left, like the low information voters. There is people that are just going about their lives. Some people, I know you and I don't do this, but some people just vote for president and then turn their ballot in if they work from a mail-in state, or voting from a mail-in state. Or, if they walk into a polling station, they just vote for president and that's it. And then they, I cast my vote and then we're done.
And the back to the original question, right? The other really big refrain that I'm starting to see after the first few days of kind of back and forth, the really big refrain has come back to the Democrats, progressives, liberals in this country have been name-calling, ridiculing, demeaning, attacking anyone that has any conservative leaning for the last couple of election cycles. Basket of deplorables. This time it was, garbage people, but also just, low information voters, implying that they're poorly educated, which I haven't turned that feature off my new MacBook. Yeah, go thumbs up.
When you figure out how to do that, tell me how to do it, because I tried to look through whatever the notification, what it didn't. Anyway, go ahead.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all that aspect of it, and then you come into the other bullet point, the really big part of it, I think, which is like the just deception from the left, lying about what was going on with Biden. He's perfectly fine. He's perfectly fine. He's perfectly fine.
Yep.
He's great. There's no problem. Oh man, we can't hide this after the debate.
There was some rumbling, but those reports got buried. CNN wasn't reporting them. There was some reporters out there going, everything you're saying, you're telling me one thing, but
they weren't getting the lead. They were hidden behind a lot of other stuff. It was not a really common thing. Right. And people are looking at that, right? And that is the distrust of media that is driving people to alternative media. And what is alternative media? Almost all conservative. It's almost all not actual journalists, but individual people expressing their own opinions based off of
it's kind of what we're doing.
Circumstantial evidence. It is what we're doing. The only difference is you and I aren't coming out here saying that we're reporting news as fact.
Right, yeah.
And so you find someone that you like, that's interesting, and you lean into it. And so you got a lot of that going on. And personally, I'm inclined to believe that. I'm inclined to believe, like, liberals in this country have taken the stance of, we know better. Let us take care of you. You don't know. We do. We're educated. And they've completely lost the connection to the working man, right? Like, what was it? One of the biggest unions in the country was not willing to endorse Kamala. It's like the first time a Democratic candidate hasn't gotten that union's endorsement.
There was a couple on different coasts, like from the 60s. Some of them weren't. And then some of them came out and said they did. Then some, I think, what was it? The Teamsters came out and supported Trump. Then Trump said some things, some anti-union things, and then that person was like, well, you made me look like an idiot. Like, there was some union stuff going on in the background. What are the other things? You heard that? What else? Was there any other? Because like I said, I have probably the same bullet points written down that you have. Biden dropped out too late. You covered that.
I didn't cover that, but Biden dropped out too late, right?
That'll do it.
She didn't have enough time to build a campaign.
100 days, 100 plus days, which, to be honest, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah.
She didn't distance herself from Biden well enough, right? There's a lot of discussion about she lost the campaign because she wasn't willing to take a stance on Israel, Gaza. In fact, like, you even sent something that was kind of implying that directly with the number of votes and the split.
Yeah, there was vote tallies from the swing states. Michigan, there's a massive Arab American population. She was like, in a couple of the states, she was like 30 or 40. We'll talk about it. I have it was a reporter that like grabbed the graph of like the vote. When all the votes came in, they grabbed the vote tallies. And you're like, yeah.
On a couple of swing states.
Yeah, it was like 3, I think Michigan, whatever. We'll see the map.
Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I think that was it.
And at the end of the day, right, like, again, it comes back to the economy, and you look at the media afterwards, and I think a lot of those people that voted for Trump are feeling somewhat justified. Lisa shared a video from a psychiatrist that talked about the election and kind of trying to help make sense of it, and she described it as it was a fuck you vote.
Well,
of people that are really pissed off at the left for not listening to their concerns and telling them that they're not concerned.
A lot of things that people on the left are bringing up as well is that not just in America, but incumbent races all around the world, if you're an incumbent, you're losing. Incumbents are losing in Europe, in parts of Asia. All the incumbents are losing. So
I guess technically Kamala's incumbent.
Yeah, that's what people are saying, is that, it's an incumbent. Because again, if she says, well, I don't think I'd do anything different than Biden, you're like, okay, well then. And,
right.
Not to harp on Gaza, but like when you say, oh yeah, I want there to be a ceasefire, but Israel has the right to defend itself. It's like the Biden's been saying that for a year plus. So that's kind of the same talking point. You're talking about a ceasefire. Anyway, I also heard, the left needs a Joe Rogan. I heard that.
Good luck manufacturing that, right? And in fact, I watched a clip today from Secular Talk. Oh, yeah. And at the end of that, he played a whole bunch of Joe Rogan podcast clips of Joe Rogan. I'm supporting Bernie.
Yeah, he had Bernie on his show.
Yeah. And historically speaking, Rogan has done that. And this particular clip was focused on something else, but there was a ton of clips of Rogan having progressive, left-leaning Democrats, Cornel West, some other far more left-leaning people, and talking about like, hey, I'd be happy to pay taxes if I knew more taxes if I knew it was going to be doing good things.
Yeah, I think I do. I understand people's feeling towards that, and I get what you're saying. It's like good luck manufacturing it, but I will say counterpoint. The right did do that. They did manufacture that. The left can't though, because the left's whole thing is like populism and we don't want money. But if you're on the right and you're willing to take money from billionaires to start like the Daily Wire and stuff, then you're in a different position than people on the left that are like, we're a populist and we don't want money from people.
But a left Joe Rogan needs to happen organically.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan happened organically.
No, yeah.
Trying to force it to make it is a manufactured thing, and it's more of that just pandering that everyone's sick of. You're not going to make it.
No.
It has to happen organically.
Yeah, and again, it's...
Their better bet would be winning Joe Rogan back.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, that I think that might be a whole episode. I think we did stuff on the media and stuff before, but, like, there is a pipeline between some right-wing talking points and, like, Trump in a way, you know? Or, like, the MAGA thing, like the idea that I understand it. Like, I don't agree with it, but the idea of you're a business owner, you've clawed from like we're talking right now. If you can't afford to meet your basic needs and you have grinded out a small business, you've held on to every bit of capital that you have people under you that are working and you're successful and you're showing that off of like, hey, we got this car, we got this office, whatever. And then someone comes along and says, well, we need to tax you. You're like, well, you're not giving it back. And so to me, all that makes sense to be like, yeah, I'm voting for this guy because he's going to let me keep the stuff that I've earned, right? But on the left, it's like there's these whole...
But that's not the case with Rogan.
No. Well, he did move to Texas because he didn't want to be taxed. Like, his whole thing is like, you know... without...
He is not alone of the people that have left California.
No, but
because of excessive taxation.
Well,
he moved to Austin, the most liberal part of Texas.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll derail the whole thing talking about Rogan. But I'll say that I heard that was one of the things. I also heard... what was the other thing? One thing I came up when I was looking over my notes, because again, I'm a nerd, and I looked over my notes. The Democrats kept using the word existential. They used it for anything. Trump is an existential threat to democracy. This is existential. That is existential. And I told you over the phone, if we as people cared about things that are existential, climate change would be fixed. We would not be talking about climate change, because if you tell somebody that something is existential, what does that mean to somebody that can't, again, provide for their family, their community, their kid, whatever? That means nothing.
They're struggling to pay their bills.
Yeah, that means nothing. You probably, and again, you and I have talked to people that like they don't look at the news as much as we do and stuff, and so they did not see all the crazy stuff Trump has said. They
intentionally don't watch the news.
They saw January 6th. They saw January 6th, and even conservatives, when they're polled on January 6th, most of them are like, I don't like that. I don't like any of that. But like, again, like we talked about in the beginning, that fades into the background and you just start thinking about the economy, you know? And that's the most important thing, you know? I'm trying to think of what else. Trump cared when nobody cared. Kamala should have done more interviews. I heard that too. That she should have done.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, because...
And she should have actually let the world... I mean, you and I talked separately about this, but my own personal viewpoint is she was so concerned with making everyone happy that she wasn't willing to take a stance on anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's the criticism of her, that she is... Also, I heard this kind of at the end that I didn't write down, but like, Trump can go on Joe Rogan and just talk for 3 hours, right? And most of it is... He literally talked about nonsense. He talked about whales. I just saw like a 3-minute clip of him talking about whales. No idea what that was about. But, you know, is Kamala going to do that? She didn't. But could she do that for 3 hours? And I think that's some of it. You know, like Trump went on but he went on Rogan. He went on Aiden Ross, which is like a young streamer. He just, it's like, yeah, I'll sit and chat with you. He went on Flagrant with Andrew Schultz, a comedian. Went on him for like an hour and a half. They ribbed him a bit. The funniest clip out of that was when Trump said he's basically an honest person, and Andrew Schultz laughed in his face. That was pretty good. But it's stuff like that where he'll take the hit and be like, oh, I'm sitting here for an hour and a half. I'll just chat you up. Could Kamala do that? And like, she did go on an NBA podcast and talked about the Warriors. She's from Cali, obviously, so that's like her team. It's like you need to do more stuff like that. Of like, oh, and that was another critique on the left I heard of like, no matter what you think of Trump, he will go to a rally, turn on Ave Maria and dance, and you're like, oh, this is kind of nice. Kamala is talking about existential.
He'll also get to a really awkward point in the rally and not really want to talk anymore and just dance for 9 minutes.
Yeah, that was Ave Maria one where he's like, play it again, and you're like. He said something about a different version. It's like, I think there's a lot of versions of Ave Maria. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, there's it's been out for a while. But Kamala needed to just sit with people and talk about, and but it's hard. And, from the left, it's like, well, we ran a politician, much like Hillary Clinton. We ran a politician. Trump was like shooting from the hip and, whatever. So it's like, oh, this guy's kind of normal. He could talk for 3.5 hours. Even when Rogan called him out, when Trump, he calls his whole thing the weave, when he'll mention something and then go around. And Rogan even said in the interview, hey, man, the weave's getting kind of wide. Like, bring it back. Like, I don't know where you're going. I can't follow you into that sweet night. But I wanted to share this. This is the first thing. It's just a clip. This is Pod Save America. Again, whatever you think about politics, these guys worked in the Obama administration. They won 2 elections. That's what a lot of people point out.
And if this is what I think it is, right? Like, man, this just reinforces he waited too long.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can.
And the gaslighting.
I'm going to see if I can. It looks like the audio is coming through. So hang on. We'll play this.
Joe Biden's decision to run for president again was a catastrophic mistake. It just was. And he and his inner circle, they refused to believe the polls. They refused to believe he was unpopular. They refused to acknowledge until very late that anyone could be upset about inflation. And they just kept telling us that his presidency was historic and it was the greatest economy ever. We just heard him again say that it's the greatest economy ever. Clearly, 70-80% of voters don't believe that. They don't believe that about their own personal financial situation, but they just keep telling us that. And then after the debate, the Biden people told us that the polls were fine. And Biden was still the strongest candidate. They were privately telling reporters at the time that Kamala Harris couldn't win. So they were shivving Kamala Harris to reporters while they told everyone else, not a time for an open process, and his vice president can't win, so he's the strongest candidate. Then we find out, when the Biden campaign becomes the Harris campaign, that the Biden campaign's own internal polling, at the time when they were telling us he was the strongest candidate, showed that Donald Trump was going to win 400 electoral votes. That's what their own internal polling said.
There were polls showing 80% of voters thought Joe Biden was too old to get a second term before the debate. And then we all watched the debate. And then in the last few weeks, Biden was campaigning, and he said, we need to lock Trump up. He created a controversy over whether Trump supporters were garbage. He said, the weird thing about slapping Trump on the ass. Like, his moments on the campaign trail weren't flawless either.
You cannot.
It's absurd. It's
absurd. I'm trying to be generous here.
I'm done being generous.
I want to stay for the record. I also think all the TV money ads should be.
Should be.
So yeah, they later talk about. Did you hear that and everything? I had the audio come through.
Yeah. Okay. The video didn't come through at all. On my end, I sent you a snip of it, but
you could hear the audio. At least
I could definitely hear the audio.
So yeah, that's the important part.
And yeah, I mean, I think the most damning part of that, and you and I talked about it, I was floored, was the part that like Biden's internal polling was showing he was going to lose to Trump with 400 electoral votes.
I heard that, and I was also like, I paused
Which
it.
is like,
because I heard this.
Why were you?
Because I listen to these guys every once in a while, like once a week. They do like an international show too, so I'll listen to that. But I listened to this, and I was like, I paused it and was like, what? And then somebody clipped this out. Thank you to Anthony Lemessa. That I appreciate it. I was like looking for this one clip, and somebody did it for me. So yeah, thanks. I was like, it was gonna be what I was gonna do. So yeah, it's insane to me, And then something we didn't mention. Harris's team was part of Biden's team, right? So she inherited his team. transition team to help run her campaign. So like, I can't imagine the internal conflict when you have your own people. Whatever you're going to say about how she ran the campaign, and there was complaints when she ran a few years ago about she didn't keep staffers. There was turmoil. Now, pair that with the fact that you have new people and then you have old people and your philosophy is different, and then you're clashing all the time. I will say one thing that they point out later. They say, hey, we just want to point this out because they were like, should we rethink TV ads? We went canvassing in different states like Nevada and knocked on doors, stuff like that. But they said, the one good thing they'll take away from it is where they did that versus Trump, where they're like, we had a ground game, he didn't, like in Pennsylvania, where there was reports that Trump's ground game wasn't that great. They closed the gap on the lead that Trump had. Now, Trump still won, but what they're trying to say is knocking on doors does work. Canvassing works. Ads work. We ran ads in those states. And Trump did lead at all the states, because he gained in everything except at Washington State and Utah, basically. That worked. So that's like a positive takeaway of like, this stuff still works. Us still going door to door and talking to people. So we can't throw that out with the bathwater. But they did mention also alternative media, like podcasts. Like, that's, people don't get their news by watching CNN anymore. You and I like Counterpoints. I like Counterpoints. I do listen to the Daily Wire when I can. I'll be honest, it spurts when I listen. I will listen to the show. I try to listen to. I haven't listened to The Blaze in a while. They have a couple people on there that I'm like, this person is insane, and I don't know if I can watch this segment. Maybe if they got someone else on, but I try to watch that stuff. But like, you'll listen to a podcast. I'll listen to Sam Harris, even though I disagree with them. That's just how people get news now. We don't listen to CNN podcasts. Even the New York Times, it's like, do you guys have a style guide for podcasts? Because Ezra Klein, who I think has an amazing radio voice, has been doing their podcast a long time. His like staccato and like audio form, I listen to their other podcasts with other hosts, and I'm like, he like set the mold for you guys, because like, you're a different host and you sound like that whole Ezra Klein, like timbre, like it's like he almost is like, this is how you do audio, and everybody does it. And it's disconcerting to listen to the New York Times for many reasons.
It might be a style guide. I mean, it would 100% make sense, right? They keep it consistent, right? Yeah. This is what people are coming for.
But it sounds like,
this is what works, and so we want to mimic it.
It sounds like an impression, though. So part of me's like, oh man, you sound like
that's the disadvantage to alternative media, right? People leaving the other media sources we used to have, where it was actual journalists held to a journalistic standard, doing actual journalistic work. And nowadays it really is like, hey, I'm gonna start a podcast, I'm gonna start a blog, and I'm gonna say whatever I want with whatever information I want, and no one can stop me, right? This was Glenn Beck when he spun off the Blaze. He left Fox and went left CNN and went to Fox, left Fox and then went on his own. And at that point, like, he can do whatever he wants. Now on Fox, he was pretty much allowed to, but I'm sure there was like, no, you can't.
I think there was a line.
Like, you have to back that up.
I think there was a line with Fox too, where they're like, if one more chalkboard and you're out, like it was like one of the things where,
And so he's got a long-standing history of gathering pieces of information and putting a story together that, I mean, let's face it, the story is plausible. Right? He gathers enough tentative connections to build a plausible story. Yeah. The problem is there's zero journalistic integrity. You don't have to follow that up or base it on anything.
Yeah, I think that's
what you get from all of it, right? Yeah. Tucker's now off on his own. He does the same thing.
Did you hear that demons attacked him? He talked about Tucker Carlson said that demons attacked him in the woods or something. Yeah, that's what it is. He literally lives in the woods, and I'm like, oh God, he's alone. You know what I mean? Like, he's out there in the woods by himself. Like, oh no. But it's that isolationist thing of like, I'm not going to interact with whatever. I'm going to. And I think, and I talked to you about this on the phone, and I really believe it. Like, again, if you can't provide for your family and you're doing bad, and I'll be very honest, every time I've had I've been annoyed at people, or you have like a terrible thought when you're in line at the grocery store or doing something, it's because either emotionally I'm not doing well or financially I'm not doing well. And I can see if that is just a sustained period of time, you start listening to Glenn Beck going, this guy has a lot of good points about the Chinese banking system. And you're like, what in the world does, so...
what's the narrative? I mean, I couldn't tell you the source of it. I think it's a pretty long-standing sort of trope of sci-fi and fiction in general, right? Like you build up a catastrophe.
Oh yeah.
And then you come in as the savior.
Like, yeah, the way.
Oh man, this terrible, terrible thing! I can save you from it.
Yeah,
right? Hitler.
Yeah, Hitler
Built up the story in the narrative of the Jews are taking your job. Well, the Jews are the only ones making money. You wouldn't be poor. You wouldn't be struggling. Inflation wouldn't have happened without the Jews. And he built that up over a period of years. And then he came in and he was like, "Let me take care of this. I'll take care of this problem." And people voted for him. And when he got into office, he was able to convince other high politicians so that they were able to move him in, point him as high chancellor.
Yeah, and then he just then he just used force after a while.
And then he cleaned house, and no one expected him to. They all were like, whatever, we'll keep him in control. He'll do his thing. And most Germans loved him because once he had that authority, he was making the economy better. He was bringing a strong military back to Germany. He was bringing pride back to the country. And it wasn't until way later in the process that people really
not
woke
the good
up
pride,
like,
not like, hey, we support everybody, like the bad pride of like we're the best and everybody else sucks. Like,
exactly.
There's good pride of like, hey, we're doing
nationalistic.
Yeah, there's
right?
a good
very similar to the Japanese, right? Like we're the best in the World War II period, like the Japanese too. Like we're the highest, we're the best. We look down on everyone else, kind of mentality as a nation.
Yeah,
and not every German was like that. Most of them weren't. Not every Japanese person was like that. Most of them weren't.
Yeah,
but it built up a level of national pride and civic pride, and my life is doing better, and I can afford groceries. I can go to the bakery and get a dessert for my kids, and so like that sense
that's
kind
a big
of made
deal.
it easy for people to turn a blind eye to some of the it's limited cases. It doesn't happen all the time. It's not that big of a deal.
And I think,
in the United States, we're not at that level. I think a lot of people are terrified that it's going to become that, but I don't think we're at that level.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that in the next part. But Trump has named, now he's the president-elect, he has named a lot of cabinet members of people he wants to get, what he wants to get done.
To help him lead the country.
Yeah, and it seems like this is just a list from CBS News, which I appreciate that they just listed them out, because I was reading several articles where it was like, oh, there's these 3, there's these 2, this one's floated maybe, and this was just so far, and I was like, oh, thanks. So thank you, CBS, who did this. Catherine Wilson and Caitlin Yellick. So thank you so much. This was written today, actually, in the 4:41 Eastern. So would be 1 o'clock our time or whatever. 1:41 our time, yeah. I'm not that bad with math. But I like the fact that this is just a list. If people don't know, his chief of staff is going to be Susie Wiles. She was in his campaign.
She was the campaign lead.
Yeah, and there was an article written in The Atlantic about her and Chris LaCivita, who was like the other campaign guy. He's a Marine, I think, or a veteran at least. Anyway, there was a big piece in The Atlantic about them. I think I sent you the article. I don't know if we talked about it in an episode, but it was a massive article about their campaign. It was right before Biden dropped out. Apparently breaking news, whatever. Anyway, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. A lot of people are very worried about this just from how we have things right now going on Ukraine, Israel. He is kind of hawkish on China, but the fact is he's voted against aid to Ukraine. We think that's probably going to be squashed. No more weapons to Ukraine. Zelensky, I think, tried to butter people up. So that's troubling. Matt Gaetz, you and I talked on the phone before this, I think is just it seems like even from his conservative people that serve with him, he's a bad person and they do not like him. And they're using words like asshole to describe him. And, he just seems somebody
sharing anecdotal stories of him doing things that are absolutely appalling for someone in his position to be doing on the floor of the Capitol building.
Well, I've also seen, there's an ethics investigation about him sex trafficking underage girls. That's kind of a big deal. It is amazing
And a
to me.
close colleague was actually arrested and tried and
Went to
convicted
jail.
for it.
Went to jail for it. Yeah. So it's crazy. I think that's an insane pick. You know,
I don't want to say close friend, but a close connected colleague.
a colleague
Who supposedly was doing it with him.
Yeah, which is not great. Some of these I'm not as familiar with, Todd Blanche, but Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy. You and I talked about this, and I think you talked about it on the podcast where you thought, well, he can't be that bad. I'm going to listen to this 2-hour podcast with him talking about his beliefs, and you said like an hour in he was okay, and then hour 2 is when the wheels fell off, and he started talking about
exactly.
And you were like, oh,
and I didn't go into it thinking he can't be this bad. I went into it saying I'm only hearing other people's opinions. I want to hear what he's actually saying so I can form my own opinion.
What do you think after you listen to the?
There's just he's got some great ideas, but he's got some really scary, terrible ideas. And listening to an interview of someone else talking about him, and it might have been Sam Harris actually, and basically brought up like he's just with his background and his history and his past with his family, he's just too primed and open to conspiracy theories and accepting them without fact.
Just as we talked with conspiracy theories about what you get open to and stuff like that, for some of it, I do not blame him. He's one that I'll talk to him about, like the vaccine stuff, not. But if he wanted to talk to me about who he thought killed his father and uncle, I'll listen to a 9-hour podcast of that, because that's one of the greatest mysteries in all of like political history. Is like, who did these things?
And look, right, like he's called out some stuff from the Democratic Party and things that are happening within the movement that, to me, like, okay, you've got no evidence of this, right? Like, you're making pretty broad and very pointed accusations with little to no literally no evidence you've put forward.
Right, yeah.
But what you're saying is plausible enough. They're like, okay, I can do that. And then, he goes into things like every major news network is headed by a former CIA operative, and all of the stuff you're reading on the left media is all just a giant psyop from the CIA to control people. And talked about all the stuff with vaccines that we're aware of. And I'm like,
you and I talked about this before, but the idea
a little bit there, but
I think it was in our media episode, but like the idea of, I understand people should be hesitant to trust authority, like agencies and stuff like that. But like, if you give up and say that like nothing else matters, there's no point. Like, that's such defeatism in my point, So like the idea that all these conspiracy theories are, it's like, listen, do I have problems with Health and Human Services? Yes. Do I want it to go away? No. Like, there could be a lot of like reform and things. And, he's mentioned, Kennedy has mentioned things like he wants to stop research of like Alzheimer's and everything. And I do like, and that's the question now I'm hearing is like, okay, the couple ideas that RFK has is like, do we need to put so many chemicals in the food? Probably not. Like, those are good ideas. But does that excuse all of the like, no vaccines, no this, no that? It's like, no, it probably doesn't. So,
there's things out there that are like, okay, like, yeah, we could look into that. I could see where you're coming from on that. Let's look at the actual evidence and see what's there versus, just get rid of it off cuff. Recently started talking about right before the election or right after, taking fluoride out of all the drinking water in the United States.
Yeah.
Something we've been doing for 80 years.
Yeah, I thought it was the 50s, but yes, sure. I mean, it's been a long time. Like, yeah.
Blaming autism on vaccines.
When it's all been disproven over and over and over again, yeah.
And then, in fact, last year before, they actually did find a really solid link to the uptick in autism over the last couple of decades. And guess what it is?
Food? Like bad?
No. DDT.
Oh, pesticides.
And it goes down the generations in the germline. So the first generation, it may not hit you, but the second generation, it may. And third, it may. And so, like, post or actually around the Vietnam War, like literally companies were going around and spraying this pesticide over whole neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And so like everyone's exposed to the stuff and no one thought there was anything wrong with it. Not then later finding out that it does genetic damage down the line.
Yeah.
And so they found this connection. I don't remember the specifics, so I might be wrong. And if anyone has the actual more specifics, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, leave a comment.
That's basically the point.
Yeah.
So,
it's crazy. And then also there's I skipped him, but I kind of don't want to. It's where is it here? Well, I didn't skip him. Well, there's the other one, Elise Stefanik. She was head of the RNC for a bit. Now she's going to be part of the UN. I mean, really, in all intents and purposes, sold her soul to Trump and his team. You know, the other one I want to bring out was Pete Hegseth, with you and I talked about on the phone. Weekend Fox host, veteran, right? Was I guess a major is what I heard, which is good.
Combat veteran, decorated and celebrated combat veteran.
He has like 6 or 7 kids, but he's been married a few times. Whatever. My thing is like, it seems like it's a kind of a big deal to push someone from that to being the head of the to be the defense secretary. Is like,
yeah, it's a giant leap, and a lot of people are like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah, I know.
I mean, typically it's a retired like general,
and people were saying too, like
someone else along that level.
Well, people were like, "Well, can't you put him in like a lower position, and then maybe after a few years, you work like a decade, works up through the DoD, and then gets oh, I've done this for a while." So weird. Also,
I was reading an article about him. And I shared this with you briefly too. I read an article about him that talked about some of his books and authorship and some other things, right? So my initial position was like, "What? A Fox News host?" And then someone shared something that was like, "Quit calling him a Fox News host. He's a decorated combat veteran with multiple medals. He was a major in the military. He was super active in the National Guard. But then I read a counterpoint to that, which went down in his own words. He was asked to leave. And actually, I think the way he described it is he was spit out by the woke military. I might be wrong in that language. So
no, I think I saw the same clip where I'd heard him talk about the woke military and how woke it is now. So that is obviously a talking point that he is on. I've seen clips of him talk about.
Very much in line with kind of Trump's position of wanting to go through and remove woke officers and generals and admirals.
Apparently there is something going on right now. Like they're working on some kind of panel of people to go through the appointments to make sure they're not woke.
And other people have come out and been like, that'd be the most terrible thing you could do. You're violating the trust of all your leadership. You'd be gutting our military leadership. And we've seen what that's done for Russia. So yeah,
it doesn't really
do that.
Yeah, it doesn't help them.
So anyway, like I now have a lot more concern than I did have. And then on top of that, he's been very active and supportive of, Christian nationalistic ideals and viewpoints, talking about needing to start a holy crusade to retake America. Which
on foreign policy. Language. Yeah, no. Also on foreign policy, he talks about Israel. This is Israeli land. There's no Gaza. He's kind of like Mike Huckabee in that thing that like Mike Huckabee, same thing. There's no Gaza. This is all Judea and Samaria. You can correct me, but those are biblical terms, right? So like, yeah. Parts of Lebanon are Israel because that's Judea and Samaria. That's not Lebanon, like whatever. Doug Burgum kind of surprised there, ran against Trump, rich guy, whatever. The other one is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, which, man, where to start?
Of all the picks, she's the one you most emphasize? I think there's another one in this list
that
deserves way more.
Yeah, we'll just...
There's actually 2 in here that deserve way
more.
Well,
Kristi Noem wrote a memoir and said she had to put a puppy down, which I'm a dog lover. A puppy? Come on. That's all I'm going to say, and whatever.
It's because she shot it.
Yeah. Because she shot a puppy.
And seemed to show absolutely no remorse.
Like, well...
Now, don't get me wrong, you live on a farm, and animals get sick or wounded or injured, and you do that. There is a little bit of a coldness to it.
Yeah.
But
But yeah,
it
people
just felt off in the context for a lot of people.
People were sharing like the snippet in the memoir where she talked about it, and it really did seem like it just the puppy annoyed her or annoyed somebody and whatever. So
I don't know. I'm not familiar with it as much.
I just know that I guess puppy killers. Right? That's all I know. The one that is surprising everybody seems like it's Tulsi Gabbard for the director of national intelligence.
There's two, Joe, that are surprising everybody, but this is one of them.
We're getting to the next one, yeah. Well, there's actually three. I just saw, four technically. Anyway, there's so many. The Tulsi Gabbard, you and I talked about this on the phone before we recorded. Even people in the intelligence community are like, her? Mm-hmm. Like, she seems like a Russian asset. Why? Mm-hmm. Why would you give her the job? She's very sentimental toward, or, very sympathetic towards.
Sympathetic.
She's very sympathetic towards Putin. Like, what are you doing?
Yep. And China.
Yeah, like what's going on? I understand you don't want to have World War III, but there's a way you don't have to just give them everything they want. I've heard
repeat their talking points.
Yeah.
I think she's like the most replayed American and Russian TV.
Oh, great, that's good.
Or American politician.
Her and Tucker.
So much pro.
Her and Tucker Carlson.
Stuff.
Her and Tucker Carlson. Yeah. So that's troubling.
I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't substantiated that. That's what I heard. But I have seen quotes and clips of her in recent years being very friendly.
I've seen that
towards
too.
Russia.
Yeah, and you're like, what's going on? What's going on? Like, I understand, like, you have to, reach out to your enemies and try to be peaceful, but it seems like more of a rollover as opposed to let's try to work this out. I'm not going to give, I'm not going to
a buy off than a rollover. It doesn't seem to me.
That it could be.
It doesn't seem to me like she's like, well, they're so strong. We just need to cave. Her position seems more to be one of like, well, there was a lot of questionable activities in Ukraine, and there's reason to believe that maybe there was some neo-Nazis in there that Russia went in for. Yeah. That's not what she said. I'm just ad-libbing a pro-Russia stance.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. The idea
that's the that may not even be the tone, but that is the direction of the kind of stuff that she's.
Yeah. The other one, there's several I want to point out. Mike Huckabee. You and I talked about this.
You mentioned him earlier.
There's a lot of clips of him talking about how, there's no settlements in the West Bank. These are just communities. There's no Gaza. This is Judea and Samaria. There's no this. It's like, so that from a Christian standpoint shows like, oh, so this is how it's going to be, like again.
Now with that said though, right? Like, those are concerning viewpoints, right? It's likely he's going to lack some objectivity in that. But as the ambassador to Israel, he's going to be sympathetic to them and their causes, and he's going to be coming back to the United States, being sympathetic to their causes. It doesn't mean that he's setting policy. It doesn't mean that he's making American decisions on that. Yeah. In some cases, he'll be speaking for us, but ultimately he can be overridden, right? He's the ambassador.
We'll see.
It's still concerning.
Yeah,
but it's not as bad as the next one that we're going to talk about, in my opinion, as far as direct impact on American life and civil liberties.
Which one was that? Is that the government?
Go up, Joe.
Oh, did I skip?
Yes.
Rubio? Who did I?
Gates.
Oh, we talked about Gates. He was the one that. Objective.
You and I talked about Gates.
Well, no, I talked about it on the pod, like the idea that everybody around him doesn't like him, and
you know what, we did, and I'm forgetting, but
there's a lot. There's a lot of these. Again, this is a nice list that they've compiled, and I was like,
all of them, right? To me, Gates is the most egregious, right? Yeah. A man who was investigated by the Justice Department not a year ago, even though they didn't end up bringing charges, is going to be leading the Justice Department.
Yeah,
tell me he's not going to go in with a chip on his shoulder.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of people are. Him and Trump are very similar in that thing of like, do what you got to do, and it's like, ugh.
And then on the flip side of that too, or not flip side, the other bullet point underneath that is he's very sympathetic to Trump and the weaponization of the Justice Department. Yeah. And the irony of their conversation about the weaponization of the Justice Department is that they have full intention of weaponizing the Justice Department against those who they're accusing of doing it to them.
The other thing I think we skipped was Michael Waltz, which people have pointed out. I think this is him. He's the one who's like, yeah, we're going to deport everybody. We're going to start deporting. We're going to start deporting people left and right.
You sure that's not Tom Homan? The borders are?
It might be. I want to say Waltz because they were like, don't confuse him with Tim Waltz. I'll look it up really quick while
concerns about Doug Berman is he's going to be very friendly to oil and reduce, regulations on that aspect of it. Michael Walls, I'm not as familiar with.
No, that's not. Okay.
I think it's the other.
That's Tom
Homan that you're talking about. And there's been discussion of, revoking.
Yep, that's him. I saw an interview with this guy. This is him.
Second, I don't remember what the exact phrase is, but not naturalized citizens, but people that move to the United States and get citizenship. There's been discussion of revoking that citizenship.
Birthright citizenship? You mean if they're born in? Oh,
no.
You mean naturalized citizens? You mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
crazy because I know people, anecdotally, I know people who they did illegally, but then they became naturalized. They went through the whole process. So he's like, hey, it started bad, but he showed me his thing. He's like, I'm like, hey, man, you did the thing at the end. And then it was during an election. I think it was during, I don't know.
There's been discussion that Trump, his campaign before Tom was named, may go through and reverse citizenship because you can do that for people that have been naturalized. The
which to me is like the biggest FU to people that again have worked through the system. I have a coworker we talked about before the election that he's from Panama, and he said it was so hard. He said it's not even time because he goes that just is time, but he said it's the money you have to pay to.
It's money, it's time. You've got to study. You're getting questioned, right?
Yeah, and
by someone who's intentionally pushing your actual intentions, right? They're paid to doubt you,
and the idea
and
that
make you prove yourself to them.
Yeah, and him saying to me, "Listen, I tried hard. I did I wanted to come here," and for the government to say you're not a citizen anymore, it's like that's the biggest. I think egregious. They're like, no, they're doing what you said. You whatever. The other thing that I just have to point out, which somebody beat me to this online, but the Department of Government Efficiency, run by two people, Evan. Two people run a government efficiency thing, so it doesn't sound very efficient to me starting off. Two, it isn't under the government. It's like they're gonna make a report.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of it.
It's not a government agency. They're basically a committee of like we're gonna come up with this report and then give it to whoever, and then they look it over and go, okay, go kick rocks, whatever. I will say that we probably could do a whole new episode on Elon Musk because there is a lot in the wake of he's got a lot of contracts under the U.S. government. He's been at Mar-a-Lago every day, supposedly. They're already getting sick of him from what I've read from articles because he just hangs around all day. Doesn't he have like 3 companies to run? Anyway, there's a lot to say about that person who's got the president's ear. And, Vivek, I'm glad he landed on his feet. I didn't know what was going to happen to him after the campaign. I'm glad he found a job.
Vivek's another one. I actually did listen to a full interview with him, and like RFK Jr., Vivek had some really good points and really well thought out ideas.
And then it takes a turn, is what you're saying?
Vivek didn't go full wacko, like off the deep end, and some of the ideas of like, you can't prove any of this. Like, you can just say it. You don't need evidence.
He dodges a lot on January 6th. Like, did Trump break the law? And he's like, wah.
But he does, there's a lot that he says that I just disagree with. Things that he states as fact where I'm like, that's just not true.
Yeah.
But at least he's not like buying into every conspiracy theory on planet Earth.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird. His whole thing about racism too was strange where he said, we're in the dying embers of racism. There was that whole thing. His quote about being in the dire embers of racism, and when he was on the campaign trail, they had like a cardboard. He was at some convention, and they had a cardboard cut out of him, and people were putting racist Post-it notes on it, and so the reporter literally went out after they talked to him and just just like talked to people and then like recorded the board and then gave them the, the stick 'em notes and were like, the dying embers, this is today. Like people are writing this stuff on the board today. He's Hindu. So, I heard interviews with people when he was on the trail. They're like, I don't know about that, like he's not Christian. So it's like, Anyway, the one I think is really bad. Well, a lot of these are really bad. I think Stephen Miller, the Department of Staff and Policy for Homeland Security, he's that, you've probably seen him, bald guy. Everybody makes fun of him and says he looks like a vampire. He was the one who helped with the Muslim ban on Trump's first thing in office. He goes off on immigrants all the time, which is crazy because during Trump's first term, there was an article, I think in Politico, from his family member who his family was immigrants. And they're like, how would you feel like saying all this stuff to your family? Because we did immigrate to the U.S. in whatever. I think it was before World War II, around World War II. And I think some of his family members are Jewish, so they escaped the war, I think. And he's like, would you seriously say this to... it was like his uncle wrote an op-ed that basically said, would you say this to your family members of like, give us your tired and your weak, and would you tell them to turn around? A lot of people that, no matter what I think about the politics of it, some people are escaping, literal persecution from governments or whatever, or, in Haitian, that country is just insane, and people are escaping there because they want a better life, and they're protected because of the situation that's going on in Haiti, and we're going to tell them, no, go home. It's like, that's, plus now they've been protected for so many years through whatever thing. If you disagree with it, that's fine. But on the books, as it stands right now, they're, protected refugees or whatever. So you're going to upend that whole process. I don't know. That, to me, that doesn't sound very American and welcoming to say, well, how about we just say no to all this, even though it's been on the books for years. And I don't know. It seems very... I mean, we've kind of always done this. If you watch any kind of documentary on World War II, you kind of realize we've always had quotas when it comes to immigrants. But this is even, I think, a little bit more galling, where you literally put your foot down and say, we're going to bar people from coming into the country, like with the Muslim ban. And we're going to, and there was some floating. I heard some stuff, which I don't know how it's going to work. Could be unconstitutional. But then again, Trump has a majority in the Supreme Court. The idea that they were going to end birthright citizenship, which is, your kids are born here, they're citizens. So that's, to me, insane that you would do that. So
I mean, that's something that's been a staple in our country for generations.
And I know
generations.
I know
if
people...
you're born in the United States, you're inherently born as a citizen.
Yeah, I mean, I understand if people have problems with it because maybe the parents aren't naturalized yet or whatever, but like, come do something like reform, you know what I mean? Like, don't just say no. Like, that's, I don't know how that's going to work.
This is a difficult one for me as far as like, I don't know this individual already on the fact that he was part of like building the Muslim ban.
Do you want me to pull up? I can pull up an image of him. Maybe you'll see him. If you just...
That's not my point. My point is that like that conversation is one that you and I think have had before. Yeah, I've seen him.
Right there. There's Stephen Miller.
Yeah, you and I have had the conversation before too. Like, immigration is a difficult one, right? Like, I really struggle with, how do we set the balances, right? Like, we are struggling to take care of our own as is. We don't have good systems set up to take care of our own as is. Like, we don't have it figured out. And then if we bring in too many other people, if they are not contributing to the overall economy, then they become an actual burden. So there needs to be a measure in it, right? Like, you can't just have an open faucet and anyone and everyone who wants to come in has to come in. Borders do need to be controlled. The part of it that bothers me more than anything is the racially intentionally, or not intentionally, but the
targeting of like different...
The racial targeting in the groups that are allowed in and aren't allowed in, that bothers me. The kind of the cultural targeting bothers me, but it's sort of that thinly veiled kind of racist overtone that that I have a problem with, right? Like, my own particular viewpoint on immigration as a whole, like as far as the idea of illegal immigration, and I shouldn't put that in air quotes because that's what it is.
That's right? What it is.
You come over the border not through the correct process, be it in a boat coming over from somewhere in Asia, be it coming across the border in Mexico, be it coming across one of the unpatrolled border regions in Canada, right? Like, when you're doing that, your first act entering the country is breaking the law. What does that say for your respect for the country you're coming into?
I will say
a lot of these people are good people and maybe they're desperate, but there is a process for that. And I'm sorry, the United States is not the savior for every single person who has a bad experience in their home country.
The only thing I'd say to that is, yes, it started out, I mean, I'm a liberal hippie, but it started out bad. Like the coworker was, I mean, great guy. The other guy was I think a refugee immigrant, got like the paperwork, was here with his family, kids born here, some of them American citizens, but then he got naturalized. And then the other guy that did it illegally from the Mexican border, I'll say, like, I don't like that part, but like he's like, I got to work and I immediately was like, I want to be a citizen. So he got on the path. And then, like I said, it was right near the election and he showed us his naturalization papers. He's like, I got him today. And I was like, now you can be like the rest of us and bitch about taxes and who you're voting for. And then he did make the joke. He's like, I don't like either of these two people that were like, and I was like, you're American. Welcome to America. Like, go vote, man. Just say that they all suck like the rest of us do and stuff, you know?
Yeah. But the reality of it is, like, when you make it racially or culturally motivated, that's not the values of the United States. It's not who we are.
Yeah.
We want to bring in your sick and your
tired,
downtrodden, the weak, right? Like we want to do that and give them an opportunity to shine in our country. But on the same note, you know, we've got limited resources. We haven't figured out the best way. And I'm not saying this from a protectionist standpoint. It needs to be measured. And what we need to do for it is not, you know, be dicks about the whole process. We need to streamline, clean up our immigration process.
I'll put that as a pull quote for the episode. Don't be a dick about the whole thing. Like that'll be the. I agree with you. But I think the little
they're
bit.
They're human beings, right? Yeah. Like, and they just want a better life. So, like, treat them like human beings that want a better life. Hell, we've got a country that people want to come to because where they live is like
not great.
Not allowing them to express themselves the way they want to. It's not allowing them to live the life that they want to lead. It doesn't give them the freedoms that they want, right? And so they're trying to come here. We should be proud of that. Like, hey, look, I'm really happy you want to be here, but right now we've already hit our quota for the year. Let's get you in line for next year.
I think
the process.
I think what I've noticed, again, I'm a liberal hippie, but the little
you said
bit,
it, not me.
I know the little. Well, whatever. I'll embrace it. You know, we always say, just say you're biased. That's what I'm doing right here. The idea is that, yes, I agree with you. But I think what it is instead of burning the system down by kicking everybody out, it's like, we need reforms, you know? And the little bit I know, years ago when I studied abroad, a teacher went and talked to people that were going over visas and allowing people to come in the country or get visas to travel abroad. It was the same immigration process, right? And he said that the thing that I learned, and this is a very low level anecdotal thing, but he said you have fewer people doing the job and they work long hours. So like any bureaucracy, like, you know, they're just overworked and tired. And like, that's why it takes 16, 18 months to even start the process. Like, and so for me, I know, again, that's anecdotal, but if you look at the process, you're like, we can improve this process, you know, and we could.
I know for a fact that the process is incredibly painful and difficult. And yes, we can. And that's one of the things, and I think I might be wrong, but I think in the interview with RFK, that was one of the things they talked about. Like, let's automate these portions of government, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's bring technology in to streamline these processes.
Maybe.
It doesn't need to be a human being going through all of these steps.
Well, maybe.
A human being should need to verify it at the end.
Yeah.
But, right, like, you bank without ever talking to a teller. We all do it, right?
Yeah,
it's all right here.
Yeah.
Like, and that's massive financial decisions.
When you have to, like,
when
you have to call someone, it's like a big game. Anyway, I just think,
yes, we need to verify your identity, and yes, you need to show ID, and we need to make sure that you're who you say you are, and we need to, like, verify a lot of this other stuff. But right? Like we can streamline a lot of the front end of that.
Yeah. I just think Stephen Miller, based on the first administration, is like one of those things. It's a big FU to anybody that was like, oh, maybe he'll be more moderate. Maybe we'll whatever. It's like, he was up there on the Madison Square Garden thing after Tony Hinchcliffe or whatever going like, you're out basically, like it's like, whoa, dude.
The second term for Donald Trump, and I may have said this in one of our earlier podcasts. I know I've said it to you. The second term for Donald Trump is his lame duck term.
Wow.
I've talked to people who have expressed that they think he can win another term. I've heard
legally he can't, though,
that there's some loopholes that he,
right.
like the way it's worded, it's only 8 years in a row. It's not 8 years total, right? There's a lot of legal theory and maneuvering on that. And I've talked to two people who have been very adamant that Trump can run again. He said he's not going to. I don't really care. In my opinion, this is his lame duck term.
Well, to be honest,
I shouldn't say lame duck term. This is his last term, which means he is going to do all of the things he wanted to do before. He understands how the system operates more. And so personally, I think as president, he's going to push through a lot more stuff that leans into that. And the people that are his yes men, the ones that he thinks are loyal, that have his ear, are going to be able to plant the bugs in his brain that are going to direct him to do this stuff. Right now, he doesn't run the country. He is the president. He has executive order powers, but really, he's kind of setting the tone. He's asking for things to get done. And me personally, I've said this before. I think you've read articles and we talked about it. I look at this list of nominees. Some of them are serious nominees. Most of them are fuck you nominees. I think it is a loyalty test as I see it.
Yeah, I think
but
you're
people
right.
that push back against my nominees, I know are going to be pushing back against me when I try to do everything else, and so I'm going to do what I can to sideline them.
Him pushing on his nominations to be like, well, let's make these recess appointments where you guys just rubber stamp everybody through. Are they going to do that? This will be the first test of no. There's a limit to your whatever. I'll say this: like we talked about it on the assassination attempt with Trump. Again, liberal hippie, I still don't want Trump to die, right? I don't want him to get shot at or anything. But I'll be honest, I was worried about Biden being this old running again and being president. I'm worried for Trump. He's, 78. He is, I don't care what his doctor says.
It's a stressful job.
Stressful job. He doesn't seem that healthy. He says he's like the healthiest, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Because RFK, like, whatever I think about RFK, like, that guy's in shape. I mean, I've seen him at the gym. He's like, tries
RFK to has already come out in some report somewhere and talked about how he doesn't appreciate Trump's diet.
Yeah. Maybe he could work on that, the health and human services of Trump's diet. Just go there and be like, no, just knock the McDonald's out of his hand.
No McDonald's.
No McDonald's. So
we're getting Diet Coke.
Yeah, we're getting to the end of this. So anything are you depressed? I know the liberals, it's like a funeral that we're dealing with right now. I mean, what are you? I mean, because you're a libertarian, but like we've been very vocal. You're not a fan of Trump. Like, what do you think? Are you worried about these? Are you worried it's going to be everything everybody said of like it's going to be full on authoritarianism right away? Or
I'm going to tell you right now, if Tulsi and Matt Gaetz push through, I'm going to be a lot more concerned for what actually happens. I have conservative friends that are going to tell me you shouldn't be, don't worry about it, or what they're going to do is going to be better for our country. They're doing the right thing. They're clearing out the swamp, and I just don't think so. I think they are self-serving people who have figured out how to manipulate a lot of people who are worried and nervous and distrusting of our government. And I think these people are going to do a lot of damage to our country. I don't think they're going to destroy it. I don't think they're going to break it.
But they're going to bend it a bit. They're going to, when you drive down
the way through, I expect that the American ideals that I believe in will no longer be what our country stands for from a governmental standpoint.
Yeah, I'm kind of like you. Yeah. I'll say,
and I look at our current Senate and House and the Republican Party as a whole, and if they greenlight these policies, if they bend the knee kiss the ring.
Well, the recess
the
recess appointments are going to be the first test of, are we actually going to go through the process and have hearings, or are we just going to literally
and
adjourn?
Several people that Trump has tapped have indicated that they are in support of that.
Yeah, so we'll see. I was gonna say this at the end. I thought about it a lot, and I wrote bullet points down. I'll just say this: if you are conservative or on the right, this is Trump's last time in office. I mean, legally, at least, unless something changes. You think he should be in office more? That's a question for the Supreme Court. But Trump has been a mainstay of politics for like, what, a decade, I would say? Like, good enough, probably. So as a conservative, you have to think, how are we going to move forward as a party? Are we going to continue these ideals? If you don't like Trump, you're like, we need to find something else, because people have tried to be Trump. We've talked about it when we did the midterm episode, and people are not Trump. Other people are not Trump. He's the only one that's able to harness this, like almost like a well, not even conservative, just like a Paul Bunyan, just lasso this out of the sky and go with it. Because everybody else that's ran was unsuccessful, and most of his candidates lost when they tried to get reelected. They tried to stop the steal, all that. Most of them got shot down. I think you and I talked out of like 30 something, like 36 of them, like 25 of them were shot down. Anyway, my point is, what is the party going to be after if you're a conservative? What is the party going to be rebuilt? Are you going to go back to the middle? What's going to happen? But I think conservatives are a little bit on the back foot, because it seems like most of the party, and you and I just talked about this, have coalesced around Trump. This is what it is. You either bend the knee or you're out. So there's going to be a lot of never Trumpers going to be doing podcasts, interviews, giving background things that they always do of like, this sucks.
Joining the bulwark. Oh, by the way, the article that I was reading about Pete Hegseth was written by the bulwark.
Oh, the bulwark's great. I listen to bulwark all the time. You know, these conservatives are like, man, this sucks. So I'll say, I think if you're conservative, you're a little bit on the back foot, because everything's going to coalesce about Trump. And you probably have about 4 years, obviously, to decide, like, how we're going to do this. There's the midterms in 2 years. So maybe you can put some candidates in there that are not Trump-like, less MAGA, stuff like that. And I think if you're liberal right now and you're, as Ben Shapiro would say, drinking your own tears and having a funeral, I'm not as depressed as other liberals. I think this is almost a call to action of like, hey, whatever you didn't work. Bernie Sanders has already come out and said, imagine that. You stop talking to working people and they don't vote for you. Look at that. Why don't you maybe try that a bit? Because it worked. And I'll say this before everything kicked off internationally with on October 7th. Well, I mean, Ukraine was going, but when October 7th happened, that's when Biden's approval rating just cratered, right? In the beginning of his term, when he passed the Build Back Better, the Inflation Reduction Act, he did
a terribly named bill for what it was.
Yeah, sorry. But anyway, no, I know it bothers me too, and I like it, but I'm like, why this name, guys? The college, the college debt relief, which Evan, if you have to mute your mic and scream, I understand. That you don't like that, but all these things like the reclassification of weed, all these like populist things, Biden's approval rating was like huge. I think he was in the 50s or 60s or whatever. It was big. He was more popular than he's ever been, right? So like that shows right there that like that's what people care about. You know, but the problem with Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction and the college thing is some of those take time. And when inflation is rising, you need relief right away. A lot of people have also pointed out to the CTC, the child tax credit during COVID, gave a lot of relief to a lot of people. And it wasn't, I don't think it was conservatives' fault. They didn't get enough Democrats to re-up it. Now, whatever you think about handouts and all that, it still was a massive boon to the working class people, and they were able to survive in a time when inflation was rising and all that kind of stuff. So listen, if you're liberal, you got time. But don't, I understand, like, you know, everybody's given the asterisks of like, hey, it's rough out there. We need a week or two to kind of to rethink of everything we've said. That's true. I guess take whatever time you need. I mean, even if you're conservative, like you could be like you right now, like this is not good. But like, what are you gonna do? You know, are you gonna like, you know, being upset about it doesn't help. I think for me, what it is like, what can you do?
Find the good, point out the bad.
Yeah.
Work against it. You know, question people when they bring up stuff that's just factually inaccurate.
Yeah, like I said to you, there was a couple times where I wanted to go off on somebody, but I was like in a group call, and so I couldn't. But I'm not as upset as other people are. My thing is like, okay, So let's start paying attention to what's going on. Let's start reading about these people. On the, like you said, if these people get through, I would definitely pay more attention to, okay, so these people just bent the knee and let them do what they want. What else is coming down the pike, Right. And then I think
like Matt Gaetz actually gets through and he starts enacting all of the policies that everyone was like, Trump's, I'm going to be a dictator for days, BS. And then Gaetz actually starts like bringing in special prosecutors and investigating literally Trump's enemies.
I've heard
opponents.
I've heard people that work in the foreign policy division are like staying out of the country. They don't know what's going on. So they, just to get that warning from like your boss of like, hey, just hang out for a bit. Like that's troubling. Like what's going to happen? They don't know what's going to happen. So.
Right. And so it's like, when that stuff starts coming through, hopefully people that have been like, no, it's not going to happen. No, that's not what he meant. Like, hopefully those people will be like, oh, whoa.
There was, to be really quick, there was another clip from Pod Save America. It was from a Latino pollster who did a lot of work in the Midwest and everything. And he said, we heard over and over again, and, because there's a big Latino shift towards Trump and everybody thinks it's just them. He said two things I want to bring up. One, the clip was pretty long. Otherwise I would have had it for the episode. But he said, number one, what we heard from immigrants or migrants that were working was that it's not us. He's not going to deport us. It's going to be people that have committed crimes, coming here illegally, done stuff like that. Two, we think that like, all immigrants will stand together and be like, well, if they're going to affect you, they're going to affect me. But he said, what we heard from them was, listen, we're in line. We're going through the process. We're paying the money. We're trying to be naturalized, but these people just come in. They cut the line. That's not fair. Get them out. Mm-hmm. So these are like immigrants that are saying that, like, get them out.
And he said, I had a customer years ago that was a legal immigrant, had his paperwork, and he had the same sentiment.
Yeah, like these people are cutting line. He said,
I did this the right way. I waited my turn.
Yeah. Like, and the other thing he heard, which I thought was very interesting, was he said that what I heard from other people, like, how did he put it? He said that he said there's something that happened in Florida that no one talks about where DeSantis passed like a sweeping like migrant policy where there's possible deportations, right? And he said there's a reason why we don't talk about it anymore, because after that passed, all the representatives for the different districts had to go to the communities where they represented, where there was migrants, and they had to assure the migrants, this is just political. We're not going to deport you. Like, our whole economy is, agriculture. We're not going to deport thousands of people that affect our agriculture because our economy would tank. So don't worry. This is just a political play for him to look in the state house to be like, I'm tough on immigration. We're not going to do it. And he said, so I'm not saying Trump won't do this, but also the scope of what he wants to do with immigration and also politically, is that going to work out? Because imagine all these immigrants that they're like, they're not going to deport me, and then they're on a bus going to the airport or whatever. That's politically. I mean, you talk about all the mistakes.
All those migrants that you swore were voting illegally for the opponent that actually voted for you because they agreed with you.
Oh,
are now out
we didn't even bring it up, Avin. This would be a totally other podcast, but like, can you believe it that voter fraud just vanished? Like, as they said in the Shawshank Redemption, like a fart in the wind, it just went away. No voter fraud, no problem with that was one thing that I literally wanted to, when I started hearing, Joe Rogan go, oh man, voting works, I just wanted to huck my phone into a river. I was like, are you kidding me?
That was actually the clip that Secular Talk was going over that I listened to this morning or watched this morning.
Yeah, it's like, what? Joe Rogan. Like, haha, very funny, haha, like, it's not funny. So I'd say that again, if you're conservative, what's going to happen to the party after Trump's gone? How are you going to rebuild? And two, again, for Democrats, how are you going to rebuild the party? Obviously, the whole like, hey, let's have Liz Cheney on stage and talk about war hawks and go towards whatever. None of that worked, like none of that. And I will
say, that was one of the things that I read too. People were complaining that Kamala brought in neocons.
Well, I mean, we didn't talk about it on the list, but it's up here. I'm trying to think of where it maybe it's Walls, whoever it was, the guy that Trump tapped for one of his agencies. I forget his name, but he worked with Cheney. And like, so if you think Cheney is bad, Dick Cheney and everything, this guy worked with him, was like his mentor, and now he's working with Trump. So it's like, I thought Trump was the anti-war candidate. Now he's got these, neocon war people in his cap. What the crap, dude? What's going on, So I'll say this. What is both party going to do? What are you going to do? Are you going to sit there and be like, because I would say there is a lot of conservatives. I mean, even when people were polled, they're like, oh, I don't like Trump. I just want to have a good economy. So, like, if you don't like Trump, like, what's going to happen after him? What candidate are you going to, what's going to be, again, is it going to be more towards the middle? And
I've talked about it with you too, right? Like, honestly, I've had quite a few friends that are left-leaning or very progressive friends that have posted things like, if you voted for Trump, we can't be friends. You voted for someone who's hateful, bigoted, blah 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 blah.
Again, people don't read that.
Fascist.
People don't read that.
And I read that and I'm like, but that's not the case, right? Labeling every single person who voted for Trump as a racist, fascist, Nazi that wants to strip you of all of your rights is just factually untrue. Yeah. Now, what would drive someone that is a generally kind and intelligent person to vote for someone who has these policies? Think it through. They're just as aware of it as you are.
Well, I think what it is, I mean, again, the term low information is kind of a slur, it seems like. But the idea that some people don't hear the stuff he says and all that, and doesn't hear the interview with, his former staffers saying, Miller or whatever, saying, no, he, wanted us to be more like Hitler's. Like, they don't know any of that. Like, they don't. Right. They didn't hear that. But I'll say this, like you said, you'd be scared if Matt Gaetz and Tulsi get through. What if these deportations start to happen? It's like, guys, I don't want it to happen. Again, I'm not wanting to say like, well, we don't know. We don't, but it's like.
Here's the reality of it. They may try. They're going to find out very quickly that that's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, I mean,
the manpower, the money, the amount of logistical use, and then dealing with our allies. Like, hey, here we're deporting these. They're talking millions.
We didn't even talk about tariffs. I mean, tariffs.
Oh yeah, and then the tariff aspect of it, right?
The tariff.
Keep going, right? We're what, an hour and 20 minutes into this one, so we've gone super long. We could keep going.
We got a lot to say, Avid. We got a lot to say, but the tariff thing I think is interesting because that is the economy, stupid, right? And if that happens, and people's pocketbooks, like, why am I paying $9 for egg now? It's like, well, tariffs, but whatever. Right. I don't know. I had to buy something. I went to buy a TV. And they're usually $300
the other day, though,
they're $900.
That showed me that Trump is not talking about it, or if he is, it's not being covered.
Well, I think
he's not talking about his actual intentions for the tariffs, right?
Well,
it sounds to me, I'm going to be 100% honest, I haven't seen enough clips or discussion from him in context to understand the message he's delivering on tariffs, but it sounds to me like his message is, I'm going to make our trade partners, China specifically, pay this expense. It's going to put them out. It's going to make it difficult for them. Like, we're going to punish them with tariffs is kind of the message that I've received. And that's what's being sold. But in this particular quote or clip, I do not remember specifically, he essentially said, yeah, I'm going to force them to bring manufacturing over here for free. He was attacking the CHIPS Act about how Biden is giving money. And actually, that was the article. It was talking about how the Biden administration had just released the first amount of money
for the domestic
the Taiwanese chip maker.
Yeah, domestic
to build their factories in Arizona.
Yeah.
And Trump's position was like, we didn't have to give up a dime, right? If we just put tariffs on it, we'd force them to build them over here for free. Sure. Unfortunately, if that's how we do it, it's going to take way longer, and we're going to have a really long stretch of pain. Not months, years.
Yeah.
Getting the manufacturing over here. If we participate in that process, we can get people trained while construction's going on. We get the construction going up. We get things in as quickly as possible. You can look like the hero for bringing manufacturing and good jobs back to America.
Yeah.
If you do it through tariffs, Elon Musk said this too, and I have no idea the context, but for me, it applies to tariffs. There's going to be years of pain.
Oh, I think he said
people are pissed off about inflation right now. Holy hell.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I've heard reporters say, hey, after the election, I told my neighbor about how tariffs work, and they like turned white as a ghost. Like, oh wait, that's how it's gonna work. And I gotta say, like you just said, like I've had that discussion of like, no, like they're not building here because they don't want to build here, and the companies want to save money by building somewhere else where it's cheaper. Like, so forcing the tariff, like it doesn't. Even guys at work that I didn't think were plugged into politics. Some guy was just smoking a cigarette, and I sat down in the smoke shack. I was taking a break, and he's like, man, tariffs, are you kidding me? He started rambling about it, and I was like laughing. He goes, that's not going to solve anything. It's going to make it worse. And I was like, whoa, dude. I mean, I'm kind of like you, where I'm worried about some of these staff picks. If they go through, that's going to be the first litmus test. And again, I don't want any of this to happen. I don't want people to be deported. I don't want to pay 200% more on something because it came from somewhere else. But we'll see. We'll see if that.
We'll see, right? And that's the whole thing, right? Like, we'll see. Trump failed to deliver on his policies before. Trump couldn't coalesce the Republican majority when he had it before.
Yeah, I didn't. I actually.
The discussion is now he knows how things work and he's going to be able to do it better this time around. But there's already people who are like, Gates isn't going to.
Yeah,
there's no way.
I've heard that too. Like I didn't find it. I was going to try to find it for the pod, but in his first administration, there was a period of time where he controlled all three branches of government, and they didn't do crap.
First 2 years.
Yeah, they didn't do anything. So
the only thing he got through was tax cuts and something else that was like bipartisan. It wasn't even one of his things. He didn't build the wall, didn't make Mexico pay for it. You talk to people that are on the conservative side, he did build the wall. No, he didn't. He did get extensions built to the wall. Like, that actually did go through. But the full wall didn't get built. What was promised was not done.
And there's also, wasn't there big gaps in the wall too? Like, you could just walk through the gap.
The walls were extended, but they weren't connected. There's gaps, right? Like, and then, walls work. Well, yeah, walls work, but and I agree with that sentiment, right? Like, the idea that walls aren't going to do anything is also naive. But let's look at our Canadian border, would you? Thousands of miles, at least hundreds of miles of completely unmonitored forest lands.
Yeah.
There is a place where if you want to go to the northernmost tip of the United States of America, I watched a video of this the other day. It was kind of cool. It had totally nothing to do politically, but it was just like a video of like how to get to the northernmost tip of the United States of America, and it's like northeast. I think it's in Maine somewhere.
Yeah.
But like you actually have to drive through Canada to get to it. So you have to go into Canada. You get to this like unattended booth where you like sign in, and you call someone and you say, "Hey, I'm driving in." You drive up this road. You go down this dirt road. You get to the American border again. You have to go through an American checkpoint where you call in and you go through a bunch of stuff and like register yourself on a phone. It's just a phone booth.
Yeah.
And then you drive in the United States and you get to the northernmost tip of the United States of America.
That's nuts.
And then you reverse the process, right?
Well, they did.
Why are we building a wall there? Well, because Canadians aren't illegally coming in. That's BS, man. Like, look, the people that are dangerous for us, the criminals that you're worried about, they can just as easily come across the northern border.
Well, they are too. I mean, people have done studies, and they come from the northern border as well. It's not just the southern border. Or these shithole countries, as Trump said in a famous, whatever.
Right.
Well, Evan, I mean, so we could talk for another 2 hours,
this is what we do.
Yeah, this is what we do. I'm not mad. I'm just saying it's
from a podcast perspective, we've gone very long.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's it's an election. It's a big deal. It's and all this is big news. I'm glad we waited. I'm glad we only do it once a month because again, there's so much coming out. I'm glad I found it. I mean, this was yesterday. I got this article or today. Yesterday, I got this article.
Just the list of all the nominees.
Which I mean, yeah, because you would hear the news of like it's Gates, and then the podcast.
And again, right? Like I look at these nominees, and I've got a couple different theories of it. Part of it's just a big like loyalty test. The other part of me is kind of like it's a big fu to the libs and a big troll of the libs. Right. And the other part of me looks at it and goes, are these ones that he knows are going to be super firebrands?
Yeah.
So he can get the other ones through. That are.
I mean, if you had to give a
controversial,
if you had to give a red under the radar, if you had to give it quickly before you leave, if you had to give a red flag to any of these, like give them the you're kicked out of the soccer game, the football game for the two people in Europe that listen to this. Who are the ones you're like, no? I think it would be Gates would be the one. And I hate to say it, but I think Tulsi out of these.
Yep.
I think those are the two.
They're the two that are talked about the most. They're the two most visible, the two most firebrand. And so, like, were those two put in there as a distraction for some of the others?
Yeah, I've heard that they're
going to go through more easily because there's not as much controversy as the other two. Maybe his whole intention is like, I don't want to get these two people in, but I know if I nominate them, they're going to get a ton of attention.
Right.
And the next person compared to them is going to look sane.
Yeah. I've heard that we'll see if and also if they do go through the process, like we've talked about it before with Trump. Now everybody's looking at you. They're going to go through your phone records. They're going to go through all your account statements. They're going to go through stuff that you wrote in a yearbook when you were in college. Like, it's going to be insane. So, well, Avid, thanks for joining me for this very long episode. Again, it's an election episode, so it's going to be next month. I don't know. I wonder. We might do the pipeline episode of like the right wing pipeline podcast episode. Because we talked about it a little bit, but I tried to look up a pipeline. Like, some people have written about it before, and there's like long podcasts. I'll see if I can find some info that kind of distills it down, because I've heard it pieced together of like, here's how these people. Like the mega pipeline, kind of like you start listening to a podcast and all of a sudden you're wearing a red hat. I don't think, I'm being very quick with that. There is a process, but I think, all the criticism I've heard of, there's money on the right, there isn't much money on the left. That seems to be true. So I think maybe we'll talk about that next month. And then I think in December, well, I don't know that far. There might be some of these nominations might be withdrawn or whatever. There might be new ones, or there might be some more Trump news, which imagine that.
News with Trump, right? Of more than anything else in the world.
Yeah.
I think that the thing I'm least looking forward to is the non-stop, never-ending news cycle.
A lot of people pointed out, man, I'm tired. Like, people are just like, we thought, oh, good. I'll say this again. I don't want anything to happen to him, but and what's going to happen with Vance? Is Vance just going to be one of those guys that we were really annoyed with when he was on podcasts and stuff, or at least I was, and then he's going to vanish like Harris, and it's going to be like, haha, we thought it was going to be such a big deal.
There's been discussion that they make him the Secretary of the House, or not Secretary of the House, but Speaker of the House.
Oh. Well, he can break the tie, right?
Maybe President of the Senate or something. I don't remember what it was, but they were going to put him in one of those like top roles so that he.
Well, also we're going really long, but there's that talk that Mike Johnson, I think you brought up, and I've read other places of like, hey, stop taking people. Like, we're losing our majority if you keep grabbing these people from.
Right, because they're going to have to run special elections on those seats.
And in special elections, I hate to say this, but Democrats have won in most special elections. In 2022.
They tend to do better because they tend to get people out to vote, right? Trump's going to try to rally everyone up. And what have we learned in off-cycle elections when Trump isn't on the ticket himself? People don't come out.
Yeah. Or
maybe they will this time.
Or I hate to say it, Republicans lose. Really, that's what happens. It's like,
or maybe this time around, right? Like, Trump's made all these announcements and people are already like, oh man, maybe he did mean it. I didn't mean to vote for him. Yeah. I saw an article the other day that in several of the swing states, the search for how do I change my vote has spiked since the election.
They're like, well, in 2 years.
You can't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
In 2 years, when you vote for like the House or the Senate, you're good to go, like the off-season elections. But it's a 4-year process.
All right, man. Well, we should wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. We appreciate it.
By the way, quick announcement. There was some stuff that wasn't on Spotify. That should all be on Spotify now. I was a little behind because we stopped the feed and then started the feed back up. All that should be caught up. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Everything's a little out of order, but now we're totally caught up. This is episode 47. Everything below that should be either in your audio feed or whatever. We're on Spotify and YouTube. It hits the 20th of every month, 7 a.m. on YouTube, and then very early in the morning for podcasts, because I wake up early and I have to manually post the episode, so I do that. So yeah, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Tell your friends. We've gotten some subscribers lately, not many, but we're like rebuilding the channel back up. So the people really like the Elon episode. So maybe we'll have to talk more about the Doge Commission. I don't know what.
I'm intrigued by that. So yeah, that might be a good one for us to look into, and more information on what it actually is going to do comes out.
Yeah, maybe another month or two, and they actually talk about like a directive. Like, that'll be good. So.
or see the actual work they do in like 6 months.
Yeah, the actual work, the committee. It would be interesting if they had a hearing. Anyway, well, Evan, I guess we'll talk to everybody next month.